President Trump has until noon tomorrow to issue his final pardons and commutations, and we're hearing he plans to announce 50 to 100 more before he leaves office. Sources tell Fox News he won't pardon himself or his family members. That, of course, had been the rumor. But some potential candidates do include WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, former advisor Steve Bannon, and rapper Lil Wayne. Let's bring in Fox News contributor and former White House Deputy Chief of Staff Karl Rove. Karl, what do you make of the whole pardon thing in general?
Well, it's one of the unlimited powers in the Constitution granted to the president, and presidents should be very careful of exercising unlimited power. Just remember how Bill Clinton stained himself on the last day of his administration by pardoning Mark Rich, who'd been charged with having traded with Iran in violation of sanctions and of tax evasion. And he hired prominent lawyers and got lots of people to intervene on his behalf, including his then former wife, who gave generously to Democrats, and it left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. The president can similarly either leave a good taste or a bad taste depending on the pardons. Good pardons tend to be pardons that are granted because somebody has either been the victim of an injustice in the legal system, or because they've done something in their life since they violated the law that is worthy of pardoning them for their previous crimes. But if the president, Steve Bannon is under indictment now for fraud, just simply saying I'm going to do what I did for my man Paul Manafort, who was guilty of tax evasion, and pardon him for it because he was in my campaign, that'd be very problematic, I think, for the president.
Just want to put up on the screen the recent pardons that President Trump has done. Paul Manafort is on there, of course. Former Representative Duncan Hunter and Chris Collins as well, Roger Stone, General Flynn. That's all there. I know that Bill Hammer wants to jump in here.
Hey, Karl,
one quick point. You mentioned Duncan Hunter and Chris Collins. Hunter used campaign funds for personal expenses. Chris Collins was found guilty of insider trading. The only thing that they had in common was they were the two first members of Congress to endorse President Trump. That's not a good reason to grant them a pardon.
Now, Washington Post 2 days ago, Karl, was writing about the state of play in America when Joe Biden takes office. They compared it to FDR facing the Great Depression, and they compared it to Abe Lincoln confronting the Civil War. The pandemic has been a really, really difficult thing for us and everybody around the world. I mean, how would you put that in the same category as Civil War and the Great Depression?
No, I wouldn't. If you were looking, it's not the Great Depression because the underlying strength of the American economy is evident. We had the best economy before the pandemic came along in March. The strength of that economy is evident in places like Texas and Florida, where they're starting to come out and loosen restrictions on it. On economic activity. So no, Great Depression doesn't work. Civil War, we had 9 states that had left the Union by early January of 1861. Yeah, existential. So, I mean, maybe it's like the pandemic we had in 1918 and Warren G. Harding is coming in having to deal with the aftermath. Maybe it's 1968 when Richard Nixon is coming in after the country is bitterly divided over the war and urban unrest. But no, this is an exaggeration by the Washington Post. It's not an apt historical analogy, in my opinion.
All right, Karl, today is the last final day of President Trump in office. Must be, the Oval Office is a difficult place to leave. Give you the last word.
Well, it is. And as he leaves, we ought to remember the good things that he did. And as Joe Biden comes in, we ought to give him, as a nation, a honeymoon period to show us what he's got. But yeah, it's if you've worked in that place, as Dana and I were privileged to do, you sense how that's a crucible. It's a place that asks the most of every occupant in that office. It asks them to do things that they never thought they would be able to do. And the president has left a good, strong economy, a rebuilt defense. He's also left a country that's bitterly divided. And we'll see how his successor does at uniting us. Excuse me. Excuse me. A little something in the air in Austin today.
Get that man some water. All right,
Exactly.
Karl. Thank you.
Thank you, Karl. Nice to see you, Karl.